The life of Joseph takes a pivotal turn in Genesis chapters 40 and 41. Here we find Joseph, once a favored son and a dreamer in Canaan, now a prisoner in Egypt, yet divinely positioned for God's greater plan. These chapters beautifully reveal God's sovereignty, Joseph's spiritual maturity, and the unfolding of divine timing. The chapter opens with a striking detail. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker have offended the king. These weren't minor servants. The cupbearer ensured Pharaoh's drink was safe. He was a trusted guardian of the king's life. The baker likewise was responsible for what Pharaoh ate. Yet both found themselves in disgrace and were cast into the same prison where Joseph was confined. But even in prison, God was with Joseph. The captain of the guard assigned the two officials to Joseph's care, and Joseph, faithfully serving, tended to the needs. This shows us Joseph's humility. Even in unjust circumstances, he did not grow bitter or idle, but he served. One morning, Joseph noticed that both men were troubled, compassionate, and attentive. Joseph asked, "Why do you look so sad today?" The men shared that they had dreams, but no interpreter to explain them. Joseph's response was key. "Do not interpretation belong to God? Tell me your dream," he said. Here we see Joseph credits God as the true revealer of mysteries. He does not claim wisdom for himself. Even in prison, his faith remains firm and his focus upward. The cupbearer recounted his dream: a vine with 3 branches that blossomed and produced grapes. He took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placing it in Pharaoh's hand, Joseph, inspired by God, gave a favorable interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh would lift the cupbearer's head and restore him to his position again. Joseph then made a heartfelt plea. He explained that he was wrongly imprisoned and asked the cupbearer to remember him when he was restored, to mention him to Pharaoh and help secure his release. Joseph did not lose hope. He believed in both God's justice and the kindness of man, though the latter would fail him, as we'll see. Encouraged by the good interpretation, the baker shared his dream too. He saw 3 baskets of bread on his head. In the top basket were baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds came and ate from it. Joseph, again speaking the truth of God, delivered a somber prophecy. The 3 baskets are the 3 days. Pharaoh would lift the baker's head, but not to restore him. He would be executed, and birds would eat his flesh. Here, Joseph did not sugarcoat the truth. He remained faithful to God's message, whether pleasant or painful. The 3 days later, it was Pharaoh's birthday. In a dramatic turn, Pharaoh lifted the heads of both officials. The cupbearer was restored to his position, as Joseph said, but the baker was executed, also as foretold. But then comes one of the most human moments in the story. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. How often do we feel forgotten after helping others? Joseph's plea went unheeded for 2 more long years, but In God's plan, delay is not denial. The stage was still being set. 2 years later, Pharaoh had two disturbing dreams. In the first dream, he saw 7 fat cows were devoured by 7 thin and ugly cows. In the second dream, he saw 7 healthy heads of grain were swallowed by 7 thin and scorched ones. Pharaoh was disturbed. He summoned Egypt's magicians and wise men, but no one could interpret the dreams. This was divine timing. No earthly wisdom could reveal God's plan. Only a man in whom dwelt the Spirit of God could. Suddenly, the cupbearer remembered. "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings," he told Pharaoh. He recounted how Joseph had interpreted the dreams in prison and how each came true. God's moment for Joseph had arrived. After years of betrayal, slavery, and prison, the doors of destiny opened. Joseph was quickly summoned. He shaved and changed his clothes, a sign of transition from prisoner to presenter. Pharaoh said, "I have heard it said for you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Joseph replied, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." His humility and faith shine again. He makes no boast, only God is exalted. Pharaoh then retold the two dreams. Joseph listened not just with ears, but with divine discernment. Joseph explained that the dreams carried one message. 7 years of great abundance would be followed by 7 years of severe famine. The doubling of the dream meant it was firmly decided by God and would happen soon. Joseph didn't stop with the revelation. He moved to godly wisdom and strategy too. He advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise and discerning man over Egypt. Let officials gather and store a fifth of the harvest during the 7 good years, so there would be food during the famine. This wasn't just survival, it was stewardship. Joseph taught us that knowing God's plan should lead to action and preparation. Pharaoh and his officials were impressed. "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Pharaoh said, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you." And he appointed Joseph second only to himself. He gave Joseph his signet ring, royal robes, a gold chain, and a chariot. And people cried out before him, "Make a way." Pharaoh even gave Joseph a new name, Zaphenath-Paneah, likely meaning God speaks and lives. He also gave a daughter of a priest named Asenath to be his wife. Now Joseph's story had turned from pit to palace and from slave to statesman. Joseph, now 30 years, began traveling across Egypt, organizing storage during the years of abundance. He collected vast quantities of grain, too much to measure, like the sand of the sea. Now he was no longer just a dreamer, he was a deliverer working with diligence and foresight. Before the famine came, Joseph had 2 sons, He named them with meaning rooted in his journey. The elder son he named Manasseh, which means it is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. And the younger son he named Ephraim, which means it is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Joseph did not let pain define him. He praised God for healing, growth, and fruitfulness, even in a foreign land. As foretold, the 7 years of abundance ended, and the famine began. But Egypt was ready only because of Joseph. When the people cried out to Pharaoh, he told them, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." And so Joseph opened the storehouses, feeding the people. Not only Egypt, but the whole world came to buy grain from Joseph. The young Hebrew slave had become the hope of nations. Joseph's journey in Genesis 40 and 41 is one of faith tested, wisdom revealed, and God's providence perfectly timed. In Joseph's life, we see he remained faithful in prison of obscurity. He interpreted dreams by the Spirit of God. He uses his trials to serve others, and when the time came, he stepped into destiny, not by ambition but by divine appointment. His story reminds us that even when forgotten by man, we remembered by God. Every prison is preparation, every delay is designed, and every dream, when surrendered to God, becomes a doorway to divine destiny.